Hello, everyone. It's me, Amy, again, and this is part two with my teacher, Tressa Boulden. And right now, we're in the middle of talking about her story of how she met Melissa Sims. And where we left off, she had just finished groveling at Melissa Sims' feet to take her on as a student. And now I'm gonna let Tressa continue telling her story.
Yeah, so when I had, you know, reintroduced myself to Melissa in this hysterical fashion and convinced her that I was actually a serious student and showed her such, um, she took me on, and I rode with her at least twice a week when she was in the area because keep in mind she was still going back and forth. I have dogs barking in the background. Sorry. Um, she was going back and forth between Northern California, Sonoma County, where we are located, back to Germany, Karlsruhe, Germany. And she was still going to the Writing Institute for all the years until up till von Neindorf's had passed away in 2004. Okay, I think I met Melissa in, I believe it was 96, 98. And so anyway, when she ended up coming back, she would be staying at her house in Sonoma County with her then husband, who was from the San Francisco Symphony, cellist. And we would all gather from all parts of the United States. I mean, she had students coming from all over, Kansas and Texas and, New York and whatnot. And she had a cottage there, and they'd all bunk out there. And maybe some of them had their horses staying with her. So I became a part of that group of students, and I had my own professional barn and would haul over at least two of my horses bi-weekly and ride with her. And we often rode in group lessons, because as most trainers know, it's really hard to fit everybody in to your full day and train horses on top of it. So, a common practice in Europe that we don't do as much here in the modern days of the United States is group lessons. That used to be.
Lessons were a little different, though. Can you tell me what the format of those lessons were?
Well, you rode in like drill style. You weren't just like riding randomly wherever. There was organized, a horse length in between horses at least. And you would all start out just walking, of course, and then we would pick our horses up on the contact and ride them into connection and straight and calm, and try to create a good beat where the horse was starting to relax. And then we would spend a good, at least 10 to 15 minutes bringing the horses into stretching, that they seek contact and lengthen their outline without losing their balance. Keeping the tempo is really important, and that the horse pulled the bit from your hand and was able to open its back and learn to relax. And, if a horse doesn't do this well, then you're picking the reins back up and you're starting again many times over. And sometimes the horse would take a deep stretch all the way to the ground for a minute or two. They can't sustain this because it's very hard to balance like that. But that was always welcomed, that the horse had the freedom to seek the bit and get their neck out as long as balance was preserved. And that's up to the rider. And so those were the things she was teaching us, like if the tempo was getting too quick, the beat was too quick, she would say, slow down, slow your hip down, close your thigh as you swing out of the saddle, stop your hand at the point of connection, give a half halt, and if the horse, you released the half halt and the horse ran again, she would say, well, your half halt didn't come through, right? So repeat that. And a lot of stuff was just done by way of repeating, and honestly running into however many uncomfortable brick walls that we had to to finally get a message through, and sometimes I would get this light bulb moment, go, oh my gosh, I finally understand something. And she goes, yeah, I've been saying that for, this many months or this many years or whatever. And she'd be like, congratulations. Of course, she's like probably frustrated, as we all teachers can feel that from time to time when you're trying to explain something, you feel like you're not being heard. But it's kind of like, I always tell my students, it's like, when the Native Americans probably first saw the Europeans, they probably couldn't even see the ships. There's this theory that they couldn't see the ships because they didn't even know what they were. So if you don't know what something is, you can't visualize it. You can't imagine it until it's described to you and you feel it and you see it and you touch it. And so I always use that analogy of like, that is what riding is over and over and over again, because there's the world of riding and the technique and the feeling and all of that is obvious in your first level of learning, and it just gets deeper and deeper and more micro. There's like this micro world that you keep discovering through the horse's eyes, and our idea of awareness is so far from what a horse's level of awareness is, in feeling us just energetically, that we take for granted every day. So
Yeah.
in a very practical way, I discovered that through how Melissa was teaching me, which for myself was a great way to learn, because I'm a very visual and feeling type of person. I'm not, reading about riding has never taught me how to ride. Doing the action of riding and making mistakes and then getting corrected and then figuring out certain feelings and getting the result has rendered me the best results, because that's how I learn. I know everybody has a different way of learning. So for some, Melissa's style of teaching didn't work, because they wanted all of the theory and the gooey stuff that made it more palatable, and I think for myself as a teacher, I've learned how to like kind of bridge those gaps from like the information I received from her, and to be able to teach a variety of different students and help them grasp the ideas.
Yeah. How did you put that together? Because you know that like a lot of the classical writing that I have learned has been presented, I think, in a way that is similar to what you've learned, which is you just do it. Just do it and do it and do
Yeah.
it and do it until you figure it out.
Yeah.
There's no explaining exactly what you need to do to accomplish that. But as a teacher, you explain those things extremely well. You've helped me bridge that gap. So how did you figure out those nuances?
I think it's just part of who I am. I've always been very creative and kind of I see things in pictures and I see things in feeling, and it's how my brain works. I mean, maybe I'm slightly on the spectrum. It's quite possible. Um, and I've always loved writing. As a kid, I loved to write and try to describe different feelings or sensations. And I think I learned to explain that because of those skill sets. I mean, I could go farther back. I had a father who had a speech impediment because he had a motorcycle accident. So I often, as a child, had to explain what my father was saying
Oh,
or
okay.
guess what he meant,
That's
and I
very
think as
interesting.
kids we're kind of intuitive, and so I think I developed that a little more maybe than other people, because I feel that ability to understand people even when they're not speaking my own language, to pay attention to their body signals and their gestures, and maybe I catch a part of a word that it might sound like I understand it, and then I draw conclusions, and sometimes I'm very accurate at what I've figured out. And so I think we do that with the horse. And I watch people, I've always been a teacher, and I've been teaching since I was a very young kid, and I've always liked teaching. So I would say the training is like for myself, but I enjoy trying to depart what I've discovered to other people. And I think, it just that's as best as I can come up with why I've
Yeah.
developed those skills, you know.
That's one of the things that drew me to you as a teacher, because most teachers, when they develop the skill, it's like it stays locked in their brain. Like they've worked
Yes.
so hard to get there and here it is, but their joy is not in relaying the information. They'll give it to you if you can pick it out. But you have to pick it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think also I'm a very good student in that sense that I wanted to understand so much, so I was very observant in watching Melissa, and I just, I suffered
Yeah.
greatly in my lessons. I mean, I can't I can't say I took lessons and I walked away and went, yay me, I had so much fun. A lot of times I walked away from my lessons and I went, wow, I just got the crap beat out of me and I still don't understand what I was trying to figure out, because she would put me on, let's say, she was trying to teach me how to sit correctly to the right or something, and keep the horse on a single hoof track. She drew great joy in torturing people. So she would have me cross the stirrups over and, ride, and she'd correct my hands again and again. And I would be sitting on this horse that was hard to sit on and riding like a 12-meter circle for, a period of time until I was dying. And then she'd have me walk and then do it again on the other direction. And, that was a daily thing, not that exercise in particular, but getting pushed to your physical limitations where you think, I think I might fall off because you're so sore the next day, or you're exhausted in your lesson, but you have to persevere and push through, and that's part of what most people are never going to experience in riding, because they are not having that day-to-day horse after horse torment from their teacher. I mean, we were doing like 10 or more horses a day, with mine and hers combined, and
Do you think there's a value? Well, talk to me about the value and the drawbacks of that. What do you think that did for you as a student?
well, it taught me discipline. And it taught me how to get calm in my struggle, because when you're having somebody shoot at your feet and do this, do this, do this, do this, it stresses you out. It ignites your adrenals, because you're going, oh, you're having to take it, and be kind to the horse at the same time. So I think in that style of teaching, they're tough on the people and they're kind to the horses, but it's because there's an expectation of that you have to accept where you're at and accept the struggle. And on the other side of that, you find resilience, athleticism, and calmness, because you've hit a level of discipline where you've learned to just kind of go, it doesn't hurt anymore. After a while, it stops hurting. You start being able to plug in and channel through that. Most people aren't going to be able to learn that way in today's day and age. They don't have the time, they don't have the discipline. And, as I've said before, a lot of people, they're riding because that's their hobby and they just want to have fun, but that is honestly, truthfully, what it takes to develop a seat and to develop any kind of physical aptitude and mental aptitude to be able to be calm in moments where horses are jumping around or doing something, that your brain can actually function in a quicker but slower way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah. If hold on a second. If it's rock, can you just have them put it where the other rock is for now? Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm having
Okay.
rock delivered on my property.
Do you think that we're missing out as an industry if we don't have instructors that have that capacity and that discipline, and our instructors are not imparting that?
I do, because, we had, in yesteryears, we turned out riders who had much more aptitude just as overall horsemen, because they were in the barn doing all aspects of horsemanship. And, if you were going to learn to jump, you weren't just put on a school horse and pointed at a fence and said, oh, go jump. You had to be able to be functional in your equitation and your horsemanship to a level before you got to, take a fence. You had to be able to go over a pole and count your strides and ride without stirrups and ride without hands. When I learned to jump, and I know you talked about this also in South America, is that you learn to jump it through chutes with your hands out to the sides and doing a 2-point. And it's really the best way to learn because it teaches you all the different pieces that go into it. So by the time you have some reins in your hand, and you already have instincts to follow the horse with your body and stay over the equilibrium. And you've developed equitation and balance so that you're not interfering with the horse. And then the other things can come into play and you can only deepen that, right? But if we don't have that structure and discipline in our riding systems, we're basically just pasting people on very athletic, capable horses and expecting the horses to put up with it, which I don't think is fair, and so then what's happening is we see in our industry, in all aspects of our industry, not just dressage, but is that then people resort to force and gimmicks and all these inventions, that are out there to help better their relationship or better their abilities. And what we're making things more complicated and not getting to the point, which is, no, actually, you have to take the time and spend the time to get good.
You know what I think is a big, big risk, and you can tell me how you feel about this.
Yeah.
Is we're moving away from force, which is good in some ways, but it's turning into a cop out for skill set development.
It
Where
is.
instead of
Yeah.
developing the skill, the theory, the seat, the understanding, there's all
Yeah.
of these ways that sound nice of training horses, but they're total cop outs for skill and discipline development. And
No,
you're
I
the only person
agree.
I've
And
ever
I
heard
think that's
describe.
people, they don't, we have this great divide, like you said, people who are like, oh, the horse has a choice, has a this, has a that. All of those things are true. But it's definitely not a black and white thing. And the problem is there is no way to a skill set without making mistakes, but the mistakes have to be minimized by having somebody who's knowledgeable enough to guide you through an experience and lessen the liabilities to the horse, and we just don't have those institutes anymore. I think probably as I was a kid growing up in the 70s, that was probably the last of those types of schools. They became less and less, and there used to still be riding schools you could go to that had some kind of order and discipline and function to them. And so now we're gone to the extremes, like you said. Now free the horses, ride with no tack, no nose bands. All these things are cruel. They're not cruel if they're used correctly. All of this stuff has already been tested and tried and true. There are rules of thumb in place as far as how to adjust a noseband, for example. There is a purpose for a noseband, for example. People have become afraid of side reins because they don't actually know the true purpose of side reins. Side reins aren't for pulling a horse into a frame. They're for helping a horse channel themselves onto the single hoof track and finding the alignment in their spine. It helps stabilize the center. It's not about pulling a horse down. That's an ill use of a side rein, but most people don't know how to adjust a side rein or check if they're correct. These are things that I learned from my old teachers, but Melissa clarified a lot of that stuff to me even more so because she came from a riding background that was more specific, and it's the pure classical horsemanship of the German school, and von Neidorff was kind of a melding between the German and the Austrian school, but it was light. He wasn't, everything was about the horse and being kind to the horse and trying to teach people how to be correct so that they weren't pulling or compressing or ruining the horse's spirit. The horses were allowed to have character and personality and, at the detriment of the riders at times. I told you how Melissa told me the story, and also a couple other of the students that I've met about, how all the riders, would suddenly get bucked off of the school horses because maybe they were fresh or something. And he'd go out there and he'd be like, they're afraid, give them sugar. So he'd give all the horses sugar and all the riders are like, on the ground. But he wasn't like, oh, are you okay? He's like, the horses are scared. So it was truly about the horse, right? And the riders had to learn to fall into that. So
do you think that a person can become a classically correct rider when they're self-taught? Is that possible?
no, I don't think it is.
And why?
Because, well, you might hit some parts of it and you might have some moments of like, oh, well, that felt good, or the horse liked that. The horse can teach you things and tell you yes or no. The evolution of getting to be that enlightened in yourself, I think, requires outside influence. To take one horse and train it to do a bunch of tricks and movements isn't classical riding. As we've talked about before, conditioning versus having a relationship and feeling in each moment how to adjust yourself and adapt to the horse is very different than conditioning a horse to move its legs a certain way when you cluck or use a clicker, or it's a totally different experience. And I also think, for me, to call yourself a trainer and to be adept in riding, you have to have many different experiences on many different types of horses. And as most wise horsemen come to terms with their journey in their old age, they're like, wow, I need a couple more lifetimes to get this, because like we're babies, we're still learning, and I think until they always say until the gray has reached the crown of your head, you don't know anything. Well, I have some gray now, but I still feel like there's a whole world out there to discover. And overall, I'm at a point where I have a very good foundation to work with, so I don't feel like I get lost in that. But there's so much to elaborate on, or to still discover through the horse. And but I always stick with what I was taught with Melissa. I might take a piece from a good teacher over here or a piece that I'm like, I would never do that, that's a bad thing, but I don't but I know the principles I was taught are true, but also work for a multitude of horses, because I've tested it out and the horses have told me, because they like it. They get quieter, they get calmer, they breathe, they lick and chew, and and things flow. But I don't think it's possible to teach yourself those things by yourself. I think you need a mentor of sorts, and you need good teachers. But a good foundation is really important. And then when you have a good foundation, you can go, okay, I'm going to take this piece from this person here. Possibly, if you're able to recognize what a good teacher is, or what the underlying philosophy of being a good horseman is, then you can go, okay, that person knows something that I want to know. But if you don't understand that thread and how important it is, it's hard to identify. Then you end up riding with people based on ego. Oh, wow, they won all of this and they look how fancy that looks. You don't understand what you're looking at even, and sure, you can learn a lot from books, but you can't learn feeling and timing. And those are things that you need somebody to kind of direct you to.
Yeah, feel I think is the biggest thing that has been lost from the modern classical riding that's out there. It's got a heavy emphasis on movements to perform and a look. It's all
Yeah.
about getting these movements and getting this certain look, and assigning a biomechanical value to that look, but there's not a lot of feel. So,
No. It's a lot of like, you were talking about on, I think, one of your clips about all the words you don't really use with the thoracic sling and this and all these biomechanical terms and anatomical terms that people are throwing out there to sound wise and knowledgeable. And, I don't have any problem with knowing the anatomy of a horse. If that's what you're interested in, go for it. But it doesn't replace the feeling and the timing and the understanding of how to dance with the horse in real time. You can understand that the horse needs to lift its shoulders and bring its withers up and use its thoracic sling, but until you understand how that actually works and how refined that can be and the timing thereof, that doesn't really matter. Just putting its neck up isn't lifting its thoracic sling.
right.
There's a whole engagement of the whole body and holding a tempo and understanding when the forehand is getting away from you and then releasing that. And then maybe you have to drive energy through again, or maybe it's escaping through the right shoulder or the left shoulder. There's all these rules of thumb in place and timings and techniques to be graceful and tactful in that timing of using your technique. Melissa used to always say to me that when she would correct me, she's like, I'm telling you this, but the truth is I can't tell you as fast as it actually needs to happen. You need to sense it before it's happening. You start to lose a horse's shoulder this much. It's not even visible necessarily to the average eye, but for some horses that much makes it so that they lose their bearings into the connection. And also some horses lose their complete focus because the throughness and the relaxation is what's keeping them in their meditation with you. Mm-hmm. So you need to up there be in that space of concentration and meditation with the horse where it's like the matrix. You got to be able to find that and correct it before it's too far gone. And that's a timing a voice usually can't even get to, mm-hmm. Until it's maybe 2 seconds too late.
Yeah, that's discipline. The mental focus, the mental discipline is something that I have found impossible to develop by yourself because you don't notice how often you lose focus, and you really need somebody to continually point that out to you.
And it's tiring, you know what I mean? I mean, especially if you're on a horse that's more particular and more asking more of you as a rider to be more careful because their character and temperament doesn't tolerate sloppy mistakes or even lesser. I mean, I've had horses that I'm like, I thought I did that pretty good. And they're like, no, that didn't work for me. I'm irritated. They throw their head up into my face and jump around or something because I wasn't seamless enough for them. And, it takes a while to get a horse to where they're comfortable, that's that sensitive, that's comfortable in the connection so that they get stable and strong in their muscles so that then they're not as bothered by your indifferences. Mm-hmm. And that mentally is exhausting, for a rider because you're hyper focused. You have to be like I said, in this matrix with them, this meditation where you're like, oh, I lost this. And that's what Melissa would do. She'd put me in this meditation, let's say, whether it was on the lunge line getting corrected in my seat or whether I was sitting on a circle holding a circle line, that I was to ride this circle line and be so aware of the little subtle imbalances that were happening and try to be there in the moment of and correct it so that I could keep the horse so carefully through my hand and that my hands weren't allowed to pull backwards ever. She would be like, no, that was too hard. No, that was too, she would just offset everything with a comment until I found the space I was supposed to be in. It wasn't, okay, here, let me show you how the rein should feel. There wasn't a lot of explanation there. Occasionally she might feel energized to go a little deeper, explain something. But most of what I was learning from her was me having to really, I had to show up, you know, every day. And that's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard to take that kind of pressure. And it's hard to do that, especially when you're scared too, because I wasn't riding horses that were like, yeah, let me show you how to do. I was riding horses that we were training or that had a problem, you
Hmm.
know. Um, the two main horses I was riding with her, they were refined and they were both professional rides. They weren't, you know, easy horses. They were very particular about me being on their level of sensitivity. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think, well, let me rephrase that. What do you think it would take for our current climate to develop students like that again, like you, that were tenacious, willing,
Well,
disciplined?
yeah, it's an eagerness to learn, I think is what's missing. It, I think people want to learn. I think they want to know things, but I think they want to pay their fee and receive something, and it's like a transaction.
Yeah.
They don't realize it's a way of life, and it's a methodology that they have to fully encompass throughout their being. So I think people in society really have to come back to themselves and respond being responsible for their inner workings and start to develop themselves as a person and substance and awareness, wanting to be aware. So for what we have today, we have people who want things quickly. We want transactional information, and we're isolated. Even though we're more connected, like you and I are talking from afar, we're still kind of isolated, and it's lonely. As
Mhm.
somebody doing what I do, I think it's lonely, even though I have a barn full of students and stuff, I still feel it's lonely because um there isn't enough of a community in this to make it thrive the way I would envision. I've tried to create that, but our modern day lives are so busy. So I think things would have to slow down, and people would have to have time to vacillate in some of these things. And I think it's a societal issue, not just a horse person issue. And so I'm not sure how to cure the world of this, but I do think we're going to hit a ceiling, and I think we're headed there, where people are going, no, I need nature, I need grounding, I need things to slow down, because even in what I do, I feel like the world is moving too fast,
Mhm.
and I just want to enjoy my horses, and it's not because I'm trying to keep up with Joneses or anything. I'm just trying to stay above water where I can afford my property. I can afford to feed these horses. I can take care of them the way I need to. But, in my 50s, I posted on Facebook my steps. I did 31,000 steps yesterday. And I'm
Wow.
like, yeah. And the doctor, I had been to the doctor a few years ago, and they're like, oh, 10, you got to make your 10,000 steps. I go, oh, I do. And she's like, well, your work doesn't count.
How could that be possibly
And I'm
true?
like, so I was joking, and I'm like, should I keep going? I have to do 10,000 on top of my 31,000 steps. Another doctor came in, and she's like, they don't know anything about horses. Just forget it. You're fine. So yeah, our pace of life is quick, so things have to slow down. People have to get to their roots and be able to like we don't who gets to craft anymore, or
Yeah.
play music, or it's like some people do if they've set themselves up. But like in my situation, I there's so many things. I could never be bored. There's so many things I'd love to do. I like to bake, I like to do art, all of that. But do we have time to do it? Barely. You know how it is.
Those are the things that we really need to wonder too. Like we need time to be curious and to wonder, you know?
Right. Yes.
back there
Yeah,
were,
and I think we're exhausted as a whole. I think the world is exhausted, and
yeah.
it's upsetting, and I think that's why our whole horse culture is becoming like, a fast food industry,
Yeah. It's
you
becoming
know.
a place where we can relax and get relief from our life where we don't have to input anything, I think. Like I
Yeah.
come up to the horse to let down, and my horse didn't like that, so I won't do it because I just want to feel good and I want him to feel good because work sucks, you know?
Yeah, and when, Melissa was here, she was creating a little bit of that community, with all of us. And I've tried to carry that on in my own world where, I try to get my students to gather or giving a talk on something, that everybody needs to know,
Mhm.
about equitation or whatever, pick a topic. And, and we'll have some coffee and pastry, just trying to bring people together in a communal way. And I think, what von Neindorf did and others like him in that generation is they created those communities and that gathering of spirit around the horse, and after everybody would ride, then perhaps they all sat around and drank schnapps and had some bread and sausage or something and watched videos and or looked at a slideshow, and he discussed topics, and I never participated in any of that at Von Neiders because I was not there for more than a visit or two. But uh, these are the things I've heard his students talk about, what they would do after their lessons. It was like a men's group, if there was a men's lesson, or a whole society of people that came together from different walks of life, that he had all kinds of quirky individuals that he gave them a spot to be and a job and a function. And if you were, when they did the performances, even the children who maybe weren't going to ride in the performance were involved, and they created a little performance with them with the stick horses. But they were responsible for maybe cleaning the bridles or helping with a piece of that performance. Everybody had a job, and they had their own jobs aside from that, but you were expected to be there to be a part of something, and I think that brings inspiration, and I think that brings a sense of being, and it makes people enjoy the process of learning, and everything, is become so detached nowadays. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think the awarenesses of the horse are only going to come with the awarenesses of ourselves, and the horse can bring you to that if you have a good two-legged teacher to help you hone that as well. So
Great stuff.
I always feel like we get sidetracked when I'm talking about Melissa when we
Oh
get into
yeah,
the
you're supposed to be
details.
talking about Melissa. It went all kinds of cool ways.
Yeah, no, it did. But the long and the short of it is that I spent over 20 years working with her in different facets, and I had a period of time where I was assisting her. It was about 4 years where she was here, and then von Neindorf passed away, and she had to go back to Germany and deal with what was left of the riding school. And unfortunately, the lease on the school was coming up, and she had to go to bid for that against German influences. I think it was a German veterinarian that ended up getting the school's bid. And I think part of Melissa wanted to take on the school, and the other part of her didn't, because she had been there for so many years. She was kind of wanting to be liberated from running that. I mean, it was a big undertaking, but she was responsible for all the horses. And unfortunately, when that other person, who was also a student of von Neindorf's, but not nearly as long and not nearly as capable, because she was the head rider and von Neindorf's, person at that time. he wanted to put all the horses down that weren't as useful as he wanted. So there were older horses that were still being ridden, but maybe not. He didn't think they were viable to his program, so he wanted to put them all down. So Melissa had to hustle to find homes or situations for them to place these horses. So they ended up going to all these different random places. So that was pretty tragic. And then as far as the riding school today, it's, in existence. I think there's a riding program there, but it's not von Neindorf's riding program. It just has his name on it. And, I think they try to do something in the likes of it, but it just can't exist anymore in that way. And Melissa passed away in 2018. She had called me a couple years before and was quite sick over the phone. I think I had called her for Christmas and she didn't sound good. She could barely talk. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, oh, I just she had thought she had walking pneumonia and she had gotten some antibiotics for it. And I got off the phone and I looked at my assistant and I go, I have a bad feeling. And the hairs on my arm stood up and I went, I got to call everybody I know in Germany, have them check on her. And it's a good thing I did. One of her students got over there and got her to the hospital. And they had told her, like, had they not gotten her there, she would have been dead in 30 minutes because her lungs were filling up with fluid, or around her heart, because that's what happens before you start dying, essentially. So it gave her a couple more years of fighting cancer, but enjoying life and appreciating life. She was supposedly in remission. And she had come over here to help pack her mom up because her mom needed to go to hospice. And her mom was in San Diego. And Melissa was having stomach pain and not feeling well. And she thought she had acquired the virus. There was like a flu virus going around down there. And it so happened that the cancer had come back. And her blood results showed that in Germany, but they had failed to tell her before she came here. And so it moved pretty rapidly. And she had like 2 surgeries here because, she's having complications and stuff internally. And so I was staying down there quite a lot with her in that time and only left a day before she actually passed. But the interesting thing is when I was down there, I kept hearing somebody say February 14th to me. I was by myself and I'm like, okay, I'm probably crazy, but why do I keep hearing this? And so I finally, the last time I heard it, I was walking into hospice because we're now at hospice. And I told her niece and her companion, Harold, what I'd heard. And he said, oh, no, that's crazy. I said, I think she's going to leave us February 14th. And he said, no, she's not going to do that. She's going to leave on this date, and her mother had passed literally like a week before her. And so Melissa ended up passing February 14th in later afternoon. And I had flown back and I was in a Costco, or not a Costco, a Cost Plus. And over the loudspeaker, I heard, Melissa up front for change, Melissa up front for change. And Paloma looks at me and I look at her and I'm like, okay, that's really weird. Both of us got like the pricklies and the phone rings and Harold says to me, she just left. You were right. She passed away.
Wow.
So that was her gift to me.
For change.
Yeah, and it was really a trip. And if somebody hadn't witnessed it, then I would probably sound a lot crazier than I do right now. But that's what happened. And pretty sure she came and visited me a couple times before she went off into the light. But we were very close to the point that, I could tell people what she was thinking, without her saying anything. And so when I stayed with her in the hospital, I was able to do that for her. And, those were precious moments. So losing a teacher, like that is pretty heavy duty.
Yeah.
but she changed the trajectory of my life with horses, and I'm, continuing that journey.
What a great story.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really a
Yeah.
great story.
Yeah.
Not
So
not everybody gets that experience, that's for sure.
no, it was a very lucky encounter. Fate.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I don't know how to wrap it up. I mean, I didn't want to make everybody sad, but it was, for me, it was a gift,
Yeah.
and everything she gave me was a gift. And it's a gift that keeps giving, because when you learn something that's true, it keeps evolving and you keep learning from it. There'll be moments where I'm like, I understand this a little more, and I think, and the horses then become the best teachers to acknowledge that, you know. So
If you had to summarize what she taught you in one sentence, what would it be? The best thing she taught you, or the most important thing to you? I know that's probably hard to do.
yeah, well, in a very practical sense, don't drive into tension.
No, I like that. That's
And
a
you
good.
can metaphorically take that wherever you want, but I think that's energetically like a really important thing I learned.
Yeah, I
Don't
need
drive into tension.
to take that to heart for my life.
Yeah, very cool. All right, my dear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you next time.
All right, sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.